Chapter 31, The Eastern Logic, Heterovidya. In previous chapter, we said that learning in exoteric hall is a nightmare as the curriculum is extremely challenging, of high requirement, and awful length of schooling. If certain words have to be applied to describe the difficulty, it may be like this: resort to every conceivable and inconceivable means. The other three halls, esoteric hall, medicine hall, and math hall, foster talents in specialties. It takes 15 years on the whole schooling if you are intelligent enough. There is one major event requiring 16 years to accomplish. So overall speaking, the entire schooling takes about 15 to 16 years. If you learn well and smoothly, and you are not unfortunately to repeat the grades, graduating upon the accomplishment of 15 years, you may eventually step into society. But if you fail to go on to next grade, then your schooling year will be prolonged to 3 to 5 years. As one grade is not 1 year, but the whole academic grade, which is either 3 or 5 years. Taking this into consideration, even being average in intelligence, one who studies in any of these three halls may still be able to graduate after up to 20 years. However, it is not the same case for the exoteric hall. The exoteric hall delegates to foster versatile lamas. That's why the hall ranks top of the 4 academic halls of Buddhism. To interpret plainly, the aim of the exoteric hall is to foster postdoctorates, meaning the goal is to cultivate eminent monks and great luminaries. How long then is the schooling of the exoteric hall? 39 years. How amazing! The minimum schooling would be 39 years if you are quite talented. If you are not, then it would be quite hard to say. As there are total 13 sessions, each of which requires 3 years. Just imagine, 3 years learning need to be repeated if you fail one session. Suppose you enter this college at 15 and you will be 54 years old if you don't fail one single session. If you were a repeater for 1 or 2 sessions, you would have been nearly 60 years old upon graduation. The requirements to the students of the exoteric hall are not just the sutras recitation. Skills like sutras recitation, reading, chanting, preaching are just of the entrance level. It also requires you to expound the tenets, which means you should be capable of writing discourse and demonstrating logic deduction on Buddhist doctrines spontaneously. That's why we say its aim is to foster postdoctorates. The curricula cover the fields of Madhyamaka, meditation on the mean, Vijnana Matra, conscious only, Heterovidya, science of logic, Shila and Vinaya, commandments and rules, Sarvastivada, realist school, and so on. Basically, the foundation of Buddhist doctrines are all swept. Upon coached with the capacious and subtle Buddhist knowledge, you may graduate with a senior title as a professional starting if you are able to graduate. You are then readily eligible to be an acting Kempo upon graduation. However, the exoteric hall may potentially exhaust the entire life and energy of one person. Upon the enrollment, the 5 principal shastras alone will take you 21 years to accomplish, even you are of brilliant aptitude. You torture the nightmare, or you will be tortured by the nightmare. You don't make it just because you can't make it, but you will be definitely an eminent monk of top level as long as you manage yourself to be graduated. The advantage of the lamas to studying the 4 academic halls of Buddhism is that The main task and the only task is to study. They don't need to worry about the welfare, which is guaranteed by the government. Namely, the government will pay the salary. It is mentioned in previous chapters that, according to Nianban institution, the salary will be prepaid by the Mongolian nobilities annually. Whoever sends the lamas bears this obligation. You need to pay for 39 years for lamas who learn for 39 years. Moreover, there is no difference on tuition, whomever you are, rich or poor. What does it mean? As the lamas selected belong to different banners, some of which are rich while some are poor. But the tuition is the same. Namely, the salary for the lamas is the same. And the salary will be increased accordingly when you are graded to a higher level. What if the nobilities don't pay the tuition? It's impossible as there is explicitly regulatory rules of the Qing dynasty. If such situation occurred, the fee would have been deducted directly from the official salaries of the nobilities. The schooling system of the exoteric hall is divided into 13 sessions or 13 grades, each of which lasts 3 years. The first grade is called Discernment of Phenomena, 辨色学籍. The second grade focused study on the doctrine of mean, 即中庸学籍. The third grade, primary state of incorporeality, 具境学籍. Which means at your 9th schooling year, you are just stepping into the preliminary stage of the realm of subtle awareness. The fourth grade, Prajna and Vidya, wisdom and awareness, 慧明学籍. The fifth grade, the 70 topics, 70义学籍. The sixth and seventh grade, junior and senior vowels initialization, that covers 6 years total. 下上心气学籍. The eighth grade, the preliminary stage, 初分学籍. The ninth grade, the four stages, 四分学籍. The 10th grade, complete fulfillment of the 6 parameters, 六度圆满学籍. Namely, according to the practice of Mahayana, upon your completion of the 10th grade, which is the 30th year, you will probably have attained the status of the 6 infinite means of crossing the sea of mortality. The 11th grade, the new middle path, Madhyamaka Prasangika, 中观应成派, 新中观学籍. The 12th grade, the old middle path, Madhyamaka Svatandrika, 中观自序派, 旧中观学籍. As said, the glue of Tibetan Buddhism, which is carried by the Yonghe Palace, belongs to Madhyamaka Prasangika, 中观应成派. Hence, the students of the above 2 grades need to study the new and old Madhyamaka. The 13th grade is quite an extraordinary level, which is called the senior and junior devout beings, 上下善士学籍. It costs 39 years to accomplish all the grades, additional 3 years if one needs to repeat 1 grade. Just think about it. Who is of that courage to enroll this Zatang college? The exoteric Zatang has 5 compulsory curricula, which require 20 to 25 years to study and practice. Each curriculum would take 4 years if you are a quick learner. Otherwise, it may take 5 years. Besides, you also need to study some other courses. The 5 principal shastras of the exoterical Zatang are Pramana Vatika, 适量论, Apisamaya Lamakala, 现观庄严论, Madhyamaka Vatara, 路中论, Vinaya Sutra, 戒律本论, Abhidhamma Kosa, 俱舍论. The first shastra is Pranavatika, which is the most difficult and fundamental simultaneously. It is also called Hetovidya, science of logic. However, most of modern scholars and monks don't learn this curriculum anymore. This curriculum takes 5 years. The other 4 curricula take 4 years for each. Namely, total 21 years will be consumed for the compulsory curricula. Excuse my slip of tongue in previous narrative. It should be 21 years instead of 25 years. The most difficult one is the first one, which consumes 5 years. But there are some minor curricula like Tibetan calligraphy, phonology, poetry, and so forth, which will additionally consume 10 plus years. The historical record of Geshi to complete all the curricula in the shortest time was 21 years. Let's briefly introduce these 5 principal shastras, which don't belong to the introduction of Yonghe Palace, but the extended knowledge of Buddhism. The first curriculum is on Hetovidya, science of logic, written by the great Indian logician Dhammakirti, which is the interpretation on Pramanavatika. Hetovidya originated from ancient India. There were 6 schools of ancient Indian philosophy, one of which is called Nyaya. Nyaya was absorbed by the Buddhism, and thenceforth Buddhist logic came into being. As known, the West has the logic of Western philosophy, while the East, Eastern philosophy. The latter derived from the Nyaya in the first place, which essentially is polemics. The earliest historical figure of China who mastered Yajurveda was Tangsen, Xuanzang, the Tang monk. That very year, when Tangsen was in Nalanda Sangarama, Moksha Maha Parishad, a great gathering for almsgiving to all monks and the poor for a period of over 7 days, was being held. Tangsen's 3 masterpieces defeated all the Abhidhammikas commentators overwhelmingly. He was consequently bestowed the title of Mahayana Deva. Can you imagine the very moment that he prevailed all the Abhidhammikas presented with meticulous logic instead of quarreling? 3 masterpieces were written in that year with the application of Hetovidya. The kernel of philosophy is to seek the capitalized truth. What is philosophy? Philosophy is love of wisdom. Philosophy worships and clings to the truth, while the Hetovidya's mission is to seek the truth as well. In other words, the ultimate task is identical for the Eastern and the Western logic. However, these 2 truth-seeking differ from each other. The approach of the Western logic to seek the truth may be scoped to formal logic, which is an abstract logic, and it does not involve specific content. Well, it can be deducted in abstraction the way mathematics work. How about the Eastern approach then? Hetovidya is the Buddhist logic that involves both form and content instead of form only. It is mainly applied to debate. Besides, unlike the Western philosophy of purely formal logic, which is quite juicy in theory interpretation by theory and deciphering by cipher, with the doctrines of Buddhism, Hetovidya needs to solve the problems in life. To extend the Buddhist doctrines into real life, substantial contents have to be involved. Hence, Hetovidya encompasses 2 components, formal logic and substantial contents. Hetovidya is mainly used for debate with the methodology similar to formal logic, which includes definition, proposition deduction. The Tibetan Buddhism has attached importance to Hetovidya, in which makes the Tibetan Buddhism superior to Han Chinese Buddhism. There is more chicken soup, Chinese slang, motivational or inspirational phrases or passage to so. than logic in Han Chinese Buddhism, which leads to ambiguity and a tendency on feeling. While the very starting curriculum of Tibetan Buddhism is to assiduously study the science of logic, Hatha-vidya. Its textbook is Shi Liang Lun, Pramanavartika. Of the term Shi Liang Lun, Shi means to interpret. Whose masterpiece to interpret? Dharmakirti's teacher is Dignaga. Dignaga wrote a masterpiece called Pramana Samuchachaya, summary of the means to true knowledge. Tangsen himself studied this masterpiece directly at that time. The Tibetan version, Pramanavartika, is the interpretation to Pramana Samuchachaya. Therefore, this curriculum, to simplify put, the Buddhist logic is to learn the logic and the epistemology of Buddhism, the formal logic and the views of the world of Buddhism. In other words, through Buddhist logic, one is expected to expound what is the right way or perspective to view the world and what is not the right way or perspective. The logic and the cognition established through Hatha-vidya can thus be defined as the right epistemology, samyak drishti, correct view or ability to discern the truth. What is samyak drishti? It is not reliable on who defines. It is but inference drawn by the Buddhist logic. Namely, samyak drishti is the percepts interpreted and deducted by Hatha-vidya. Hatha-vidya in Buddhism is undoubtedly a vast curriculum. I have recommended a series of books called Buddhist Logic, of which there are 7 books total. Pramanavartika is just one of the 7. Pramanavartika alone will consume 5 years to learn, as said.